Mark Zuckerberg as a human cares deeply about education. He always has, and he's always been trying to make sure that he can support in the way that he can. And so I think it's not about a company caring or not. It's that oftentimes product roadmaps need to follow what they're really good at. And if you look at what Oculus was born out of, it's an incredible direct-to-consumer gaming device. And that was where the market was. And so that was a priority. Education's such a good use case. It's a hugely scalable market, but it's only hugely scalable once you can support it.
Today, we're going to talk about the Metaverse.
The next evolution of the internet, called the Metaverse, will be extended with 3D.
And we call this the Metaverse. The Metaverse. The Metaverse. The Metaverse. The Metaverse.
Introducing Apple Vision Pro.
Welcome to the Spatial Realities Show. Today with a great interview about immersive learning. My name is Thomas Riedel and I'm a tech journalist based in Cologne, Germany, and the host and producer of the Spatial Realities Show. In this podcast, you learn all about XR, a metaverse, immersive media, and spatial computing. Thanks everybody for your feedback for our episode 50. Thomas and I had a blast talking about Connect a couple of minutes after it actually took place. And we will continue with our talk next week when we have somebody on the show who actually watched the Connect in person and can also give us some insights how the Unreal Fest was. So stay tuned for episode 52. In this episode, I am very happy that I was able to talk to Monica Arés. She started at a planetarium, then went to Amazon and Meta, and finally arrived this year in London as Executive Director of Innovation, Digital Education and Analytics Lab at the Imperial College in London. In this interview, she will tell us about how she scaled immersive learning on a global scale. Monica will also be at AWE this year, so don't miss her out and join us at AWE Europe in Vienna October 24 and 25. Meet with the global XR industry at the most important conference for XR, spatial computing and metaverse. Make business, network and have a drink or three with me, as I will also be attending the whole conference. And as the Spatial Reality Show is an official partner at AWE, I'm happy to be able to give away 3 times 2 tickets. And today you can win the last 2 two-day tickets. And that's quite easy. Just send me an email at info@spatialrealities.de. And with that, you will be in the draw to win 2 free tickets. And if you don't want to bet on your luck to get a ticket for free, enjoy the 20% discount code as part of this community. Use Spatial20D to get 20% off your regular ticket price. Again, use Spatial20D, SPATIAL20D, to get 20% thanks to our Spatial Realities community discount. By the way, you can find all the links to the news in the show notes. And if you want to talk about spatial computing, metaverse or the future of 3D internet, you are welcome to come to our Discord server, where new interesting people sign up almost every day. And now enjoy my interview with former head of immersive learning at Meta and now Executive Director of Innovation, Digital Education and Analytics Lab at the Imperial College in London, Monica Arés. And now we come to a topic that is particularly close to my heart, as I think this is what technology is primarily made for: education. And with the rise of Metaverse access technologies like XR, and also with the help of artificial intelligence, education might emancipate out of boring classrooms into shiny new futures. To discuss how this might happen and why immersive learning is so powerful, I'm happy to welcome the former head of immersive learning at Meta and founder of Third Floor, Monica Arés. Welcome to Spatial Realities.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Monica, as we just said hello to each other joining this recording room, you just informed me about something new happened to your career and something you have to add to your LinkedIn profile soon. What is it about? And you're not in Silicon Valley right now.
No, I have to cross the pond. I'm currently in London, newly appointed Executive Director of Innovation, Digital Education and Analytics, and Experiential Learning at Imperial College. It's funny, I've spent probably, I would say, almost my entire career, except for one job, a brief stint as an actuary at Deloitte, really focused on trying to build solutions for education with newer technology. I was able to see early on, I was observing a classroom as a volunteer, that there just wasn't a whole lot of teaching and learning going on. So I thought back to what it was that got me excited about learning. And it's always when we brought some kind of technology in or made it experiential, did a hands-on project. So I kept wondering why we weren't doing this for all grades, right? I mean, if you think back to all of your experiences in your education, you probably have a handful of aha moments. And you probably remember the person, the place, or the experience that inspired you enough or made you curious enough to remember it when I just asked you. But the problem is each adult only has a handful of those, right? And so that means that they were the exception and not the norm. But those were the true learning moments. And so I wanted to figure out how to increase that number and make sure that we could deliver it. So I was able to go, get my master's degree at Harvard, where I really studied on first connecting to the right community of people who wanted to do this, the right technology, was able to teach for 10 years, and then led me to a planetarium, which I didn't know it at the time was really the precursor to VR. I got this whole dome above me. I had to practice learning how to create 3D objects that could rotate, that could move across the dome, and bring students in and just say, we don't have answers to half of these questions. So what you're thinking might actually be right. And just got them to really think differently and opened up that curiosity for them. But I kept running up against this problem when I was in the classroom that I couldn't scale beyond the classroom. And I had so many people come observe and say, my gosh, how could we reach more students than just those that come into your classroom? So again, I thought technology was the answer. Was able to make a huge move from Massachusetts to California and started a job at Amazon. They were creating one of the first learning platforms. And this was very early days. So it was the equivalent almost of just putting PDFs online with some questions and answers at the end.
So the first approaches of e-learning, probably.
Yes, but that really saddened me because it seemed like a strange use of technology to just have, words you could read and then multiple choice questions. It was great for increasing access. So I think we actually unlocked that part that was really wonderful. But in terms of engagement, I felt like we could use technology in a better way. So was able to really think deeply and create the proposal on doing learning labs where you could learn through exploration. If you're looking at a shape, you could move all the vertices and see what that whole 3D shape looked like. Make sense of it yourself before you had to answer some kind of question on it, or to lead your own journey through curiosity. So to have a couple of different pathways. Again, it was like prescribed AI before it actually was something that we could use. But we were trying to piece all the parts together that made sense. From there, I ended up moving over to Facebook. And very early on, probably my second week there, someone gave me a demo of a VR headset. And the second I put the headset on, I knew it was the medium that was going to transform learning in the way that I'd always deeply cared about and wanted to. Again, very, very early days. The experiences still weren't great. They were making people sick. The headset still needed a lot of work. But I knew I wanted to be part of that conversation that helped lead this technology into a better way for learning. So for 6 years at Meta, it was great. Was able to help create some of the early experiences like Anne Frank House and Breaking Boundaries with Jane Goodall. We worked with a lot of interesting people who wanted to figure out if it was a good mechanism for telling stories differently. So many of them had messages and so many of them wanted to connect with their audience. And so this was a different medium for them to try and to think about. able to realize that there are going to be all these jobs in AR and VR in the future. We weren't really teaching the skills for creators. So created the first curriculum to help people learn how to become AR creators with certification. And then started working with a whole lot of partners, primarily universities, and figuring out how we could lend out headsets, have them start using them, especially during the pandemic, to not just teach with them in terms of experiences, but really find digital spaces where they connect with body language and ability to share and pass objects with each other and really feel like they were there, whether it was a digital lecture style learning or just a place where they could hang out and connect. And so all of these things, again, we're slowly getting us towards a different way to learn, a more accessible approach, a more engaging approach. But it was hard. Not a lot of the audience in the learning space really trusted some of the bigger tech companies. And so it became hard to reach that audience. And the opportunity to work with higher ed and really recognize that right now what we're looking for is sort of that hub to bring it together. All of these solutions, there are like thousands of them around the world right now, incubating in startups, being tested in pilots. Higher ed has this really unique opportunity right now. It's like it's their moment, right, to transform, but they can be the hub that brings together the technology, all the research that has to be done because everything is new with AI and XR, and then really can kind of pick through all the different innovations happening in the startup space. And they can do it across every single vertical. So the great thing with Imperial College is their business school is very entrepreneurial. It's younger. And so they have that fidelity and ability to build a little bit differently and move forward at a slightly faster pace with a lot of industry partners. And so, so that became very appealing. So I'm hoping I can now from the inside really figure out how to build these solutions where we're combining AI and XR. And I think for a long time, AI and XR, it's like everything lived in disparate pieces, and each one showed us their own superpowers and kind of a glimpse into what we could do in the future. But I actually believe, if you think of all the different components, AI is incredibly powerful at adaptive learning, continuous assessment and content creation. And XR, you can manipulate things in 3D, you can learn in simulated environments. But I don't actually think that it's individual capabilities of either of these technologies that's really going to become the future of education, but rather their convergence. Because I think when we finally bring them together, we can create like the personalized tutor and mentor, right? So nobody ever has to learn alone. If you are feeling lost, you can keep asking questions. You don't have to stop learning because you're frustrated. If you're like amped up and fueled by your curiosity, you can keep asking questions and going on and on. I think we can also keep track of learning across all the different digital surfaces. So we can analyze patterns, we can verify what people are learning, and then we can create this dynamic and adaptive lessons and environments based on the continuous assessment and learning needs. So this combination, by bringing together AI and XR, I think unlocks, one, it's like, learning through exploration and curiosity, but it really unlocks 4 of the biggest challenges that we've had in education, which is engagement, retention, personalized learning, and that sort of skills-based assessment. And so I think that's the opportunity we have. That's the new era that we're kind of on. It's like fueled by the advancements in AI and XR, the the convergence of the digital and physical worlds, and just sort of the merging of human intellect and machine. All these things are new, and I think they're all going to open up a whole lot of doors and pathways for learning that we just never had the tools for before.
Yeah, absolutely. There's education since human beings are together and teach each other things, and it worked somehow. But it will be very interesting to find out what we can do even with such technology. So very interesting and very great to have you here at the show. And you just made a quick run through everything I wanted to ask you, and we will do it in more detail, of course. So you just arrived in London, and the good thing about that is that you can actually hop over to Vienna when there is the AWE this year in October. So it will be very great to see you there. I want to go a little bit back and find a little bit more out about what your personal motivation is about learning. Did you had such great moments, or did you miss them? What is your motivation behind doing this, actually?
That is such a great question. No, I think I've always been fueled by curiosity, but I also had a couple of moments that helped me realize how powerful it can be. So I do remember, once this is really cute. I told the story once too, but my dad was very creative. And so he would always like take apart all of the cars when they needed fixing, and we'd figure out how to put them back together. And we'd always have leftover screws and not know but the cars still worked. His answer to everything when we asked him if he could help us was, I don't know how to do that, but we'll figure it out. Right. And so there was always this thread of, if you want to make something and you just have paper clips and duct tape, like go ahead and figure it out and we'll get creative with it. But we had to all go to the sleepaway camp in 5th grade over in the United States. And part of the activities there was they gave us a challenge and they said, okay, you have to build a bridge out of one piece of paper and it has to be strong enough to hold this egg in a basket. And so everyone tried to make these very pretty bridges. And the only bridge that worked was the person who rolled it in a cylinder. And we learned on that day that corners and edges are the weakest part of any structure. And so that just stuck with me. I was like, oh, that's interesting, right? And then fast forward to high school, and our high school, I think it was ancient history teacher, said, all right, everyone has to go home and do this project. And those were a big deal back in those days. You had to come in with whatever project you made. So I ran home and told my dad I wanted to make an aqueduct. And of course, he went down to the basement, cut up a million little cubes, brought them up. And we created an aqueduct that looked just like the one in the encyclopedia. The encyclopedia was the only window I had into everything, right? And so it was really nice that there was a picture of one. We could see it, we could recreate it. And I remember bringing it into school, kind of embarrassed because it was very clear that my dad had made this entire project, but I was giving the explanation of it. And someone raised their hand at the end and just said, well, why does it have all those arcs? And so I was like, do you guys remember back in 5th grade when we all went to that camp? And instantly the class was like, oh, yeah. And the only bridge that worked was the one that didn't have the edges and corners. So it became this kind of through line throughout. But again, that moment was strong enough that then the history teacher was so excited that the class all rallied around it, that they were able to continue to use that. And to this day, I still think of how powerful that was for all of us to keep that connection. And then I still think about it when I see any kind of arc anywhere. But I was super, I loved astronomy when I was little. I went to space camp twice, which is probably why I love teaching the planetarium. But I think I'm someone who's, that adrenaline rush that you can get when you are excited about something. And it doesn't mean that it comes easily. I think sometimes the struggle is actually, part of it. If you can work through that struggle of not understanding, of wanting to build something better, of wanting to make something that works, and you go through the trial and error period, can be part of a very gratifying process too. And so knowing what that feels like, and knowing that I only had a couple moments of that in school, a lot of them were outside of school, but when you look at a classroom of students and they're not getting that at all, it's heartbreaking because you just want to figure out how to pass that over. Because I think when you're curious, you naturally want to learn more about something on your own. And we're heading into a world where everything's going to change, right? And so you don't necessarily have to just memorize the traditional things that we make people memorize anymore. A lot of learning still was from the days when we just had encyclopedias and everything was found in a book. They have a lot of those answers in their questions. They're in their phones, in their pockets. And so I think if we can really think strategically about how we make people better with problem solving and awareness and, creative thinking, those are the skills that I think we're going to need for our students to become adaptable as we enter this changing world. And ultimately, what makes it more fun to work on a project, to work on building something, to work on learning something.
Yeah, absolutely. What I found very interesting in your biography was that you have actually been a director of not an observatory.
Planetarium, yeah. So we had people come in. I was able to create, it was funny, this planetarium, wasn't really in heavy use. There weren't a lot of people coming in back in the, 50s or 70s. I don't remember what year. The school systems all had a choice. They could either get a planetarium or they could get a pool. And so this particular school decided to build the planetarium. And it, beautiful space, big dome. It had the very old star ball in the middle where the stars looked beautiful, but it didn't do a whole lot other than that. And so, they said, we don't have a lot of students coming in. We're not sure what to do with this. We also want, night shows. We want to get the community involved. So it felt like a really fun challenge for me. Again, had to clean it up. my dad, again, would come in and we would like put paper towel tubes together and little films on top and project constellation outlines up there. We'd figure out how to make things move across the dome. So we got really creative with lights and gels and whatever we could do to make things come alive in there. And I created lessons that were specific to every single grade, as well as adult learning, that either tied into what they were already learning in different classrooms or in the standards that they had to learn. And was able to grow it from really no students to about 5,000 students coming in every year. We started getting all the other districts, and we would bus them in. We'd have them come and enjoy those lessons. But I also had this little glass space next to it and turned that into, again, it was kind of like a science center, but I put a lot of monitors in front, and every day I would just put something that was explain what was happening or that made people curious. Everything like, why do we have a solstice? What does that mean? What's happening out in the earth, moon, and sun with all these different things in space? And people eventually start making their path walk by that every day just to see what the fact of the day was or what the question of the day was. So my goal is to really unlock curiosity for everyone who came into the planetarium or walked past it. And that led to partnerships with telescope companies. So we worked with these remote telescope companies that were based in places that had very clear skies. Massachusetts hardly has clear skies and a lot of light pollution. And we could program it to take images of distant objects. And so then to start realizing that nature just repeats its patterns. So if we can understand things that are relatively close to us, especially that pattern of the spiral, it's one of the most repeated patterns, it'll help us understand what's way too far away for us to ever reach. So having students take all of those different images to understand it far away from our galaxy was fun. Then we did a similar comparison with things that are inside our galaxy, and especially started to understand the life cycle of stars and how everything is just created out of these clouds of gas and dust and form stars and solar systems. And then when they end up going to the end of their life, they release all that gas and dust back in more form. And so it was really fun to have this partnership and allow students to go far beyond what we could have done in the classroom that way.
What I don't understand is that you then one time decided to go to Amazon, because who doesn't want to work at a planetarium?
Right.
I mean, come on.
It was a lot. I was like, I can't wait to retire and just go volunteer in a planetarium whenever I want. It is such a fun place. But, planetariums have deviated a little bit now with all the digital technology. Sometimes I go in and it just feels like I'm watching an Omni movie. It doesn't really connect you and bring you back to that feeling of wonder and awe and the stars and recognizing patterns and learning the constellations. So yeah, they've changed a little bit, all good things, but I am always surprised when I go back in and see some of the newer shows and how they're produced and made. But it was what drove me to really look for that job was that whole question of how do we scale? When I was a math teacher, I taught math to middle and high school students at Boston Latin for a while. I had 150 students come through my class every single day. It was amazing. I loved working with them. And then at the planetarium, I had about 5,000 a year come through. But that notion of, education is hard to do well. It's very hard to do it at scale. And the kids who get that wonderful teacher, they're so lucky. But there are a lot of kids who don't. Right. And so how do we try to figure out how to take some of the best teaching techniques, the best curriculum, and how do we make that more accessible to those that maybe need to supplement because their teacher isn't explaining it in the way that they need to understand it? So that was what drove me to, can technology help scale good education? So many fumbles along the way with that, as we're all still realizing. Even the pandemic taught us a lot. Yes, you can bring education online. I think it's often one directional, right? And I think that's what's interesting that's happened. If you look over the course of a human lifetime, computers have gone from sort of these very simple machines all the way up to being able to analyze complex systems and predict outcomes. But most of those types of technologies were largely passive, right? So they were just obediently doing what we told them to do. And of course, our learning ended up mirroring this relationship. And so it led to a lot of rote memorization, standardized testing being the norm. And again, I don't think any of us thought that this was the right way to learn. I just think that we didn't have the tools to make learning engaging at scale. And so I just think it ended up leading to kind of this place where a lot of our jobs are now susceptible to automation. And we have a lot of disengaged educators and learners. So the turning point right now, and again, at Amazon, I struggled with that. We've seen a lot of online platforms that struggle with it. Throughout the pandemic, we saw everyone could come online, but we were mainly getting knowledge. We weren't necessarily learning on that deeper level. So solve the access problem to some degree, not fully, but for that, I'm very grateful. But now it's like, okay, well, now how do we take these tools and actually bring in some of that personalization and some of that engagement? And so, rather than kind of staying on that trajectory that we were on, I love that all this new technology kind of made us take a sharp turn up. It's like we went to this exponential place and it's moving really quickly. And so by accelerating the options that are now available to us, I feel like what's interesting for me to think about is in the next 10 years, we're probably set to see change in technology and learning that dwarfs that of what we just saw in the last 50. And so our today's kindergartners, they're going to end up graduating into a world where their workplace and their learning environment will just be profoundly different than what we currently have right now, right? And so I think those are the fun things to think about. And all of that started from, let me go to Amazon, because I think the tech industries can help us scale and build differently. But lots and lots of roadblocks. Again, Amazon, Facebook, they weren't education companies. They built incredible products, and it was so much fun to run and sprint and build some of those products. But it's incredibly hard if you're not set to scale an organization that is meant for learning, to deploy that with all the support that's needed in a learning environment. Education works very different than just about any other industry. Hugely scalable and extremely valuable. But you have to prioritize that in the product roadmaps, or it can be very, very challenging. So I kind of joke sometimes that I was like, our old way of learning, it was really this one directional flow of content. And we were, in essence, shaping our students to be like robots. But now that the robots are here, I think we can finally turn learning into focusing on becoming human. So that means we're going to shift our priority, right, into like leveraging what humans are good at, which is awareness and higher order thinking and decision making. But we should use technology to complement these skills, right? So by handling tasks that are too tedious or time consuming or beyond our capabilities. But I think, what sets us apart from those machines really is just our ability to be curious and to imagine, or even to get frustrated, because it means we want to fix it and make it better. I think that's what ultimately gives us the freedom to explore and to innovate. But humans can only get so far on their own. I mean, we've been really unsuccessful at solving a lot of huge problems. And so I actually think it's the triad of humans and technology and machine that's going to allow us to solve problems that we've been unsuccessful at solving on our own. And I think one of those will be education.
The machine is, let's say, a method, a tool from humans. They made it. A robot is a picture of himself working. I mean, the word itself means worker. But then you went to Meta, and as I understand it right, you didn't went to Meta primarily to do something with VR, but of course, maybe something similar as you did at Amazon, and then discovered VR.
Yeah, it's funny. When I first accepted the role, they were working with a string of charter schools to figure out how to make learning more personalized. So they were trying to tackle personalized learning with a charter school who was built for that in mind. And so Facebook assigned a team of engineers and product managers to figure out if they could really help make the tools and the platform so that students could have their own pathway of learning and go at their own pace and get the content that they needed. Ultimately, that project ended up folding very early on. It had been going on for a while, but right when I got there, they ended up passing it over to the Zuckerberg initiative because they could keep it philanthropic. And I think that was exactly the right move for that particular project. But it left us, on the education partnerships team, trying to figure out how we could leverage all the different technologies and platforms that the company had to increase access to education. So a lot of natural learning already happens, just like YouTube, right? A lot of learning happens across those surfaces. It's not always called out. It's not something that's necessarily delivered in a classroom setting. But if you think of it, we used to just learn in institutions. That was primarily where most of our learning happened. And then all the digital transformation means that we are now learning on a continuum, right? And we're kind of learning little some pieces when we're ready for it. A lot of people have self-taught how to be coders, how to become engineers. And you look at the YouTube videos and you find the little kind of bite-sized courses that allow you to get credits or a certification. And we're piecing together all these different moments of learning now because we have more access to them. And so a lot of these surfaces do just that. And it's a little bit more organic at this point, which is great, but it is absolutely happening. And then I think, for me, I really gravitated towards the AR and VR technologies because I think in 3D, it lights me up to be able to manipulate objects, to think of ways in which, when you're in a VR environment, your brain gets tricked into thinking you're there. And I think it's because everywhere you look, you're surrounded by this environment. And so distractions are minimized and you get to really connect on an emotional level, on an exploration level with the content that you're consuming in there. Especially in the learning space, it opens up a huge opportunity for empathy, to feel like you're walking in someone else's shoes or to go back and forward in time. And so all these different things allow you to really take a learner on a journey, however you want to place it. And then, of course, when you take that headset off, even though you've been standing in the same place all along, you feel like you've gone somewhere. And so our brains often remember things better when we place ourselves in different areas to remember them. So it's like you might remember when you learned something in a museum because you were in a different location or in your house or in the school. And so by having that ability to put people into different places and explore differently, in the end, all the studies are showing, PwC's done a lot of them as well, but it's like you remember, it's like 15% of what you learned in lecture style learning and 20 something of what you read, but up to 75% of what you learn in VR. I just think it's such an interesting connection for our brains to make. And so all of those things I find really curious and interesting to explore. The hurdle we've really had, though, is it's quite costly and time consuming to make a lot of these experiences, especially when you try to put them on the higher end. And so that can be a blocker for education. But I think what's exciting now is AI is helping us solve that. So through AI, it's helping us create content there. We can type things into existence, start to speak things into existence. It's not 100% there yet, right? It's not quite as interactive as we want. Obviously, NERF is allowing us to just from a video quickly capture something and pop it into a 3D environment. We still want to be able to figure out how to make those high fidelity, how to have interactivity in there. But all those things are incredibly powerful for moving the needle when it comes to learning, so that we don't have to necessarily wait to show people what we're thinking. We can quickly, say, wait, let's go to the Taj Mahal. And, something like Blockade Labs will pop it open for you. You can pop in a headset and at least you can all be in this environment together. And, when it comes to teaching and learning, I think we really have to be able to have tools that are fairly quick. They don't have to be perfect, but we have to be able to have the educators and the learners be able to show what they're thinking and interact in those environments with pretty, some level of ease for themselves. So I think that's really important. And what's fun with that is, of course, as we start to build all this new content, which we will, now that AI is helping us build more and more content, headsets are getting better, we have more opportunity out in the market, we can kind of float between 2D surfaces, AR, VR. So we're having all these different, the multimodal approach is great. I think the challenge we're going to face now, though, is assessment. And, before it was like, oh, everyone learns differently, whether you learn from a book or an educator or you're on your own on YouTube. The only way we know if you learn it is we're going to give you all the same exact test. So it's like, all right, multiple choice, a couple of answers. But honestly, it's like, how do I know if you actually learned that skill? Or how do I know if you got bored and disengaged? Or how do I know if you're actually curious and you want to keep learning? We can't measure any of that. So again, I think assessment was hard at scale just because we didn't have the tools. And now suddenly we have all these new tools, and a lot of them are going to be really powerful for assessment. And so immersive technologies, you can measure your body movement and your eye tracking, which tells us a lot about someone's, kind of awareness and attention. AI can give us feedback based on chats and conversations. And we're getting to this point now where we can probably just go directly to your brain to understand what's happening with EEG data, right? So electroencephalography data is still kind of early in to figure out how much we can actually kind of garner from it. But through non-invasive sensors on our own headphones, on a headset, on glasses, we can start to measure the electrical activity generated by your brain, and what it measures can profoundly help us for learning. So it's things like cognitive load, level of focus and engagement, can also recognize emotional states in your learning style. Even some of the, like dyslexia and ADHD, things that oftentimes the learner themselves doesn't necessarily notice that they have until much later on, or that our tests wouldn't pick up. So imagine if you can combine, the AI and the EEG data to create these patterns and delivery in a way that you need it the most, right? I mean, that could profoundly reshape our approach to education, to be able to bring all these new tools together. So what I've seen in the field so far is like A/B testing. It's like, all right, we're going to teach you without VR. We're going to teach you with VR. You're all going to take the same test. Most of the time, everyone can still pass that test pretty well. It's a fairly standardized test. One interesting example, this is pre-pandemic, so we didn't actually get to do the data all the way through. So it's not like a valid study, but something that again, just made me curious. We were working with a National Geographic theater. They have a theater where they will often bring an explorer in and a beautiful screen behind them. They talk about their journeys. 400 people come. We had a couple of shows where we put headsets on every single seat. And 3 or 4 times throughout the journey, the explorer would just say, you know what, let's go there. And the audience would put the headsets on and they go to all these incredible places in the world. Beautifully done, really fun experience. They had a handful of field trips. And so they'd bring students in and do the same. So we tested 2 different groups. One of them got to hear the explorer. She's a marine biologist, talked a lot about swimming with manta rays, gave the talk, had the video behind her. And then the other group had the exact same talk, but they got to put the headsets on 3 or 4 times and actually swim underwater, swim with the manta rays, feel like they were interacting with them. In the end, they all learned the same. They could all answer the same multiple choice tests, but the questions that they asked the explorer were profoundly different. So the group that just had her speak asked a lot about her, about why she wanted to become a marine biologist, why she, how she got her PhD. And the other group ask questions completely focused on the animals themselves. How long did they live? How many babies do they have? Are they endangered? How can they help them? And so they got completely connected to the animals and started caring about them in a very different way because they had interacted with them in the way that when we travel and we see something, we suddenly care about it because we understand it better. So these are all the things that we can now start to think about how we're going to test and assess differently, hopefully break free from just the standardized tests, which we all know are flawed anyway, and start to uncover, like what can these technologies actually help us understand about that learner? And then how can we take all that with artificial intelligence and curate the next steps for that learner? So if they're, if we can tell that they're overwhelmed or saturated, remove some of the stimulation, the colors, the audio, we can reduce some of that, right? Or if they really want to learn more and they're ready, feed them some more challenging experiences. But we now have all those capabilities. I think for me, another challenge is like, well, now we need a nervous system. Now we have all these new inputs and outputs. And so how are we going to connect all those is another challenge. Historically, we've done that in the form of an LMS or a learning management system. And that is typically what we see in online learning, right? It's like, oh, I read something, I answered a question, I got to either do an open free form, I answered ABC. But we keep trying to retrofit these technologies into our old LMS, and we keep failing. And so I do wonder if maybe our old LMS systems are no longer sufficient and need to be reimagined. The future, a lot of people are saying, what if the LMS is just all AI, right? Like, what if it's either a bot or like some almost completely intuitive and visible system that can sort of gather assessment based on all your digital interactions and analyze your patterns and deliver relevant content when and where you need it. I think, the capabilities are definitely not there yet. So as we go dive into this world, we might realize where the limitations are. But as AI matures, I think it has the potential to transform that learning management system into a responsive and adaptive and deeply personalized experience. But these are all the systems that we need to rethink. And again, it's going to take that combination of probably tech industry partners, startups that are building individual solutions, and universities to be that hub where they can put together pilots and they can put together that research and really understand how we move education forward.
Yeah, sounds like also we need to find out more about what actually is good learning, what would we actually want to achieve with education. And that's what technology always is good at, asking those questions and reflecting our own learning and our own life on ourselves and find out, okay, what's it actually about? You're all about education and you're so enthusiastic about all that stuff. I want to be a little bit more boring when talking about Meta, because you have been in Meta since 2017, left Meta 2023 in January. So you still have some kind of a fresh impression what is going on at Meta. Okay. And I wanted to ask you what role immersive learning played at Meta. How many people were working on that topic? How important was it actually for Meta? I find for us, it's a very important topic, but it's also a very hard topic. It's a topic where, let's say, it's hard to make money with it. So I can understand that it would not be the very most important topic at Meta. Maybe you can give us a glimpse into what it actually looked like at Meta and how you felt working there with that topic.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think Amazon and Meta had the same problems. I think they built a lot of solutions for a lot of industries. And so they had to prioritize where they placed it. I think Mark Zuckerberg as a human cares deeply about education. He always has. And he's always been trying to make sure that he can support in the way that he can. I think it's hard to support beyond an initial donation, an initial investment, providing great hardware, right? And so all those little pieces are the roles that the technology companies play very well. I think when it comes to actually integrating in a way that we can do it at scale, in a lot of these education environments, Google and Apple have done it. They have won the trust of a lot of educational institutions, and they've been able to support that in a way that makes sense to both the company and the institution. I think Amazon and Meta are really more along the lines of sort of that informal learning, of the lifelong learning. And so I think it's not about a company caring or not. It's that oftentimes product roadmaps need to follow what they're really good at. And if you look at what Oculus was born out of, it's an incredible direct-to-consumer gaming device. And that was where the market was. And so that was a priority. Education's such a good use case. It's a hugely scalable market. But it's only hugely scalable once you can support it, once you have mobile device management, once you can actually integrate it at scale into the systems that currently exist. That requires a much, 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 much bigger investment and more teams and support. And so it doesn't make sense to prioritize that until you know the market's ready for it. And VR has been a long time coming. I mean, I spoke at AWE for the first time in 2019. And I do remember people being like, I think my topic was like, top 3 values of VR for learning or something like that. And people were interested and curious, but not in a way that I think they were going to go take action on. It was like, oh, that's interesting. I would never get my school to agree to this. Or they would start with 3 or 4 headsets, or they have a small pilot. And then they realized they couldn't scale beyond it because their IT department didn't want to have to load content onto 100 headsets every single time or fix it every time there was an update. So all those things broke down in a way that we knew as a company we weren't ready to promise that because we couldn't actually support it at scale. So those are all things that are being built and they'll slowly get released. And at that point, it makes sense. But early days of any new technology, it's you have to be careful about who's using it, who you can support, what content you're building on it to really catch that critical moment and start to scale it out to the market. There were so many requests that came in every single day of, ways people wanted to use it that were really incredible use cases, and they're all right. But when you have to pick 4 or 5 to really focus on and build those teams around, you do have to start to kind of, I say ruthless prioritization and figure out what goes in there. So the people who really care deeply about making sure this is going to work for education, they're all still out there and nobody's getting discouraged. Again, it's about finding the right place to do it and the right people who can drive it forward. And part of it is patience. Part of it's waiting for the technology to catch up, for enough developers to make content that's going to be, you don't want someone to go somewhere and not have anything there. I think universities individually are starting to make some of their own content, especially when it comes to medical training or soft skills training. Those are hugely valuable and much easier to teach in VR than not. But we don't need them all to create their own version of it. So can we start to think about repositories that we form specifically for higher education or for certain skills that people want to learn? And so all of this is slowly starting to grow and take shape in different pockets. And my job is to make sure I'm there to connect it all and make sure that we're gathering what we need in a really valuable way and that we're delivering it with care and giving it access to people so that we can hopefully change the industry at once. Otherwise, it was isolating before. Right? There were pockets of teachers doing it, but there weren't other teachers in their school using it. And so we often saw that donations, this is historically true for a lot of technology, but you can donate the technology. But if you don't support it, there's not enough reason to keep going back. It just collects dust in the back of the room after a while. And so that I don't want that to happen, right? I want to make sure that we're ready and that people see the value and that we can deliver on that value and really help students gain something from it that's measurable, that pushes their education forward, and that we're ready because all these tools that we're going to bring into education, it's going to become the tool belt for all of these learners' future of work. And so they need to get fluent in them because they're going to start using them probably daily as they enter into that workforce. So that whole pathway, it's amazing how quickly it has progressed, although being in the industry, it feels super slow. Like, why isn't it all ready by now? But when you look at the advancement that has happened even in the last 5-6 years, in the technology, look at how many headsets are on the market right now, right? It's like a lot of people are recognizing the value and building it at different levels. AR is becoming much, much easier to use and to work with. And now we have all this great ability to kind of have it understand where you're at in the world and trigger it. AI has just supercharged all of that. Like I said, it's going to make content creation easier. It's going to help people understand what they want, when and where, and deliver it in a very relevant way. It's going to allow us to have AI tutors, whether it's on our phone or in our headsets, just companions in life that will sort of help us intuitively get there. And the ultimate goal, again, headsets are really uncomfortable, right? I mean, I can't be in one for more than 10, 15 minutes. I think most people feel that way. But the real goal is to seamlessly integrate these technologies into our daily lives, almost invisibly. And when we can get to that point, that's where we're all headed. Right now, it's still bulky and everything's in these little disparate pieces. But that's ultimately where we want to get to, where it's an incredibly valuable tool across whatever it is that we're doing. So I think, right now, I think we're in a weird spot in education, honestly. I think a lot of people are wondering what the return on investment is, especially at the university level. It's hugely expensive. A lot of universities are still very much teaching with the old methods. And jobs are changing, right? I think one of the most important things we can do right now is help students stay adaptable. And that actually is nurturing the EQ and using AI to help them with critical soft skills necessary for the future of communication and work, because there is undeniably going to be job displacement. I think someone said in the next 10 years, we could see a loss of 25 million jobs. And so OpenAI predicts that most of these will be in some of our current high-paying jobs, like mathematicians and developers and financial analysts. And so, again, it just sort of opens up that whole thing of wait a minute, what are we delivering and how are we measuring it and why? But we have faced job extinction before. This is not the first time it's happened, and we've come out stronger for it, right? But I think we have to remember that the development of these new technologies will displace a lot of jobs. It will also lead to new ones, right? They always lead to new industries and new roles that we can't even imagine right now. But the best way for us to prepare is to first adapt our education. And that's the responsibility that we have right now.
Surprisingly, albeit all these automation, we still need more workers. So somehow something seems to be happening with automation. It probably generates more work than we think. One question just came up when you were talking was how to implement immersive learning the right way. So what you don't want to have is just an immersive learning environment. I read that today. Very good question of a colleague of mine was asking okay, now we have these handicapped boys here in that school, and they were implementing VR headsets to help them out. And then he asked, but shouldn't we teach them how to cope with the real world in the first place? And I was like, of course, everything. We should teach them everything. Also, working with immersive learning environments. So maybe you have some tips how to implement immersive learning in a way where people don't think, okay, it will take away my child. It will be gone forever, like, or something like that. You know those ressentiments. You heard them probably a lot. How to implement it in a good way?
Yeah, I think again, it's about we don't need to just erase everything that's currently there, right? There's a lot of good stuff that's already there. And so the trick into that innovation is sort of a gentle pushing of boundaries, making sure that we're using it when and where it's appropriate. And so that's still just adding a couple of layers into existing curriculums. If it's something that you have to learn in a way that is very hard in traditional training methods, then leverage VR. Make sure that we're taking one class time to help people go through that and experience it and come back and talk about it. There are all these interesting ways too. I mean, there was a study done with students in Manhattan. They don't often get to go to national parks or even to green space, but it's hugely beneficial to just walk in the forest for stress level, for anxiety. And so having those students from time to time just take a virtual field trip to a park where they could look up at redwoods and they could hear the noises of nature reduced a lot of their anxiety and helped with their focus. And again, their reality is, they're probably not going to be getting to Yosemite anytime soon. But the fact that we could take them there in VR made a pretty big impact in their day from time to time. And so those little moments, I think, are important when we think of, a lot of colleges with surgical training or technical training. You can read all you want on how to do a certain surgery, but if you can get in there and start to practice in a simulated environment where it's okay to make mistakes, where you're learning all of the different muscle memory that you need to do those, where they can simulate, things that go wrong that you have to react to when you're not actually in front of a real patient, all those things stick in your brain so much faster and so much better. And so right now, I think the real trick is, where can this really help push the boundaries of education that we couldn't do before because we just didn't have it? Make sure that we're using in those right places. We've seen education time and time again falter, right? We just call it like, old wine in a new bottle. But if you're going to bring people in to do the exact same thing you can do without the headset, don't do it. That's a terrible use of it. And people are going to quickly realize they don't want to go back in there to do something that they could do otherwise. So it's really finding those valuable use cases that would otherwise be too dangerous. You can travel back and forth in time. Empathy is enormous, walking in someone else's shoes, and actually have those visceral reactions. Business school case studies, like be in the hot seat of the CEO and try to understand what it feels like to solve some of that rather than reading the huge, long novel. So there are all these moments where I think it's important for us to understand across technical skills, across the soft skills, across well-being, where we need to use this technology and why it's more valuable. Right now, again, we can't measure it. So we just kind of put people in there and then we sort of bring them back to the traditional way, which is how it has to start. And then I think we'll slowly start integrating it into new ways of delivering content, new ways of assessing it. And it still takes the teachers or the professors who are excited about this. And not everybody is, and that's okay. Not everybody wants to change their teaching style just yet. And so in innovation, I think there's a big culture of show, don't tell. Sometimes you just have to build enough of it first that people see it and understand the value, and then they want to come along, versus just telling them you're going to go in and change something and they get fairly overwhelmed and nervous. So that ripple of the fabric of innovation often happens in that space, right? When you're first building new things, and you need to find those that are very comfortable and excited to push through and work through some of those kinks that happen. And then you can kind of bring everybody else along once you're confident that the integration will be a little bit easier.
And I'm pretty sure when you have been in Silicon Valley in San Francisco, you have been in the park and watching the real redwood trees and smell the grass and how they actually smell the trees. And you would have not have replaced it with VR, I'm pretty sure. So
Correct.
It's not a replacement. It's not a replacement if you have the stuff, of course, but it's more like when you don't have it, or when it's actually dangerous to do it, like, for example, visiting a volcano. It's, of course, great to visit it in person, but not everybody can do that, and some people shouldn't do it, and sometimes you should not go to an erupting volcano.
Yep, so, you're 100%. I always say that. I'm like, I mean, if you can take your class to Yosemite, go to Yosemite. It is spectacular. But if you can't, VR is a really great second option, as opposed to not going at all, or just looking at a picture or a video, right? Your brain, again, does connect to it on a very different level. So absolutely, think of all the different places in the world we'll never get to. And if we can pop our headsets on and go there, but it also helps people prepare, right? Doctors Without Borders puts their volunteers into these headsets to understand what it's going to look like when they arrive at a place that was just, stricken by an earthquake or some other natural disaster, so that their brains can kind of go through a lot of that first and have a bit of a visual, and emotionally they've adapted. Then when they get there, they know what they're in for. So there are all these really interesting ways that we can start to use this to help people.
So let's introduce a new technology, artificial intelligence, which is of course not that new. We're using it since decades, and but because of the large language models, everybody is talking about it, and that's actually what was the next hype after the Metaverse hype, which you of course received directly at being at Meta, and I'm pretty sure that was a very exciting time for you. Entering artificial intelligence, the Metaverse is over. Of course not, but listening to the press, it seems like it is like that. And when I listened to you in this talk, I got the impression that what AI is capable of doing with immersive learning is make it more interactive. How comes? How is that possible? And do we already have some examples of working AI in learning environments?
Yep, we do. You're absolutely right, calling out the hype cycles. I think everybody has a love-hate relationship with them, right? In the sense that it's like, if we didn't have these hype cycles, no one would know these technologies existed. So they at least put the word out there. They give people an idea to understand what it is. Everyone gets all excited about it, nervous about it, and then they die down. And it's when they die down that you actually build all the real solutions. So having them kind of go a little bit quieter allows you to start to build on the back end. And then the next time people hear about it, there's some really great solutions that make sense to them. So we're in a really interesting space right now. The hype cycle is absolutely all AI. And you're right, AI was done before. I do kind of look at how we integrate it into VR. Historically, it was a little bit, for simple terms, it was like the spreadsheet method, right? You could have an avatar react in one of three ways. And you could, it felt like there was a little bit of AI built into it, but a learner would very quickly realize that it was programmed. And then there's a bit of a disconnect in your brain because you're like, oh, someone on the back end just gave this 3 different channels depending on what I picked or my interactions. Now with generative AI, it's opened up a whole different way to interact with it. And so the way I'm seeing it, especially in, soft skills training, is you can go and capture your best trainer at an organization. And you can then put all that information into AI and create that AI generated avatar that has all of that information that the trainer had. But as you go through your training and you ask it questions, it feels like it's actually having that conversation with you. And so it's become a much more natural way to interact with them. I think, so I've seen definitely in the soft skills training, we're doing it a little bit on technical skills. I work with an organization that does aerospace training. And so same thing, you capture the person who is normally doing the on-the-ground training for these pilots, create a digital twin of the cockpit in which they have to train in. You bring all that together, and as they're learning the techniques of flying, again, there are simulators. We have real simulators for aviation flying, but they're hard to get to. They're expensive. They take up a lot of room. If you can bring it into the headset, it's not quite as high fidelity as those, but it's really great because now you can sort of get into the entry level of how do I fly this plane? How is this plane different than the other ones that I've flown? And the AI avatar companion tutor is sitting there with you. And so if you have questions, you can ask them and get those answers immediately. If you do something wrong, it can help kind of feed you different ways to think about it. It can notice things before you might, like, oh, you're tilted a tiny bit. Like, how would you fix that? So all these new ways of incorporating a very natural way of discussing content, I think is great. We've seen Tailspin do it really well as well with their content. That's all soft skills training. You're sitting across from another avatar and you're having a difficult conversation. You're firing someone, all those different, you're learning negotiation techniques. All of that now is much more realistic and valuable that we can integrate some of this generative AI or training like large language models that we can pull in from. So I think those are all really exciting. I've seen it done in some like college simulations where they'll do digital twins of universities and have some learning going on. And then if you're curious about something, it's still text-based, but you can pull up your little AI. It's almost like having, ChatGPT, but within the headset, and you can start to ask it questions about whatever it is, but it's integrated into the content that you're learning. So all of that makes learning so much more natural, right? We are social creatures. We typically and historically have learned through asking people questions, having a discussion around it. When you just get one answer and that's it, like through a search, your brain isn't allowed to keep going. And now that we know that we can keep going, it's really fun to see what's happening with that as a way to learn. Again, I think we have to be careful about where information's coming from. If we just open it up to the internet and AI has all that access, and then the learner is like, wait a minute, is this true? Is it not? We've seen a lot of false references. We've seen stories that get made up. And again, when we search the internet, we see the same thing. You have to have some level of adaptability around it and make some of those good decisions. But when it comes to really technical training, being able to lock down what people are getting just based on that content, those materials, that's when we'll be able to, I think, start to train the AI based on that to really help build a powerful experience for what it is they're learning. So all that's starting to slowly come, and you can piece together all those boxes of information, whether or not you want to open it up to the huge models and the internet. It's an option, but when it comes to learning certain things, it might be better not to have all of that available, because then the learner has to go through too much questioning about whether or not it's real. So I think we'll see everything from a very small, very focused, localized type of learning that AI is going to help us really learn well on one small thing, to everything in between that, all the way up to, I'm curious, let me just quickly ask the AI on my phone and see what happens.
And one other point I find very interesting is that with immersive technologies like XR, of course, there are more possibilities, but at the same time, it has some negatives. For example, not everybody can access those devices because of different circumstances. So how can AI help us make immersive learning more accessible and inclusive?
I love that question. I think AI, again, it's going to connect us to everything that we need delivered to us. And so not everyone will have a headset, and that's okay, because you might, if you already have a mobile device and you're interacting with AI on it, it can already pop open certain 3D objects. It can already overlay things into your physical world. It can already help blend the digital and physical in the same way that a lot of us go into VR for, but maybe we don't need it. And so I think it's being the AI can be intelligent enough to figure out what's the value of what someone would see in VR and bring it into a mobile experience that brings a lot of those tenets with it. And so I think having access to even just a chatbot is hugely valuable compared to what we had only a couple of years ago. And so most of the world now has access to some kind of a mobile device. Not everybody, but the most accessible way to reach learners is to make sure that it's available on mobile. And so being able to have AI be one of those components that they can access through a mobile device, right there, we've already started to push boundaries that we hadn't before. And we don't have to get everyone into that headset. I think we can add a lot of value to what's currently there through being able to learn through conversation, learn through chats, learn through content that gets delivered to you, not because you searched it, but because the AI knew that actually would be a really nice next few steps for you to think about. And so we don't always know, like, if you don't know what you don't know. And so knowing that there's a way to kind of bring yourself beyond where your current comfort level is, whether it's in terms of content that you're learning or even confidence, right? I think sometimes we can train AI to help people get those skills of more confidence. All of that, I think, is going to increase accessibility beyond what it's at. But I do, just like everybody else, I do fear that, right? I think with this new era, we have to be very careful about the impact we're making, right? And whether it's positive or negative will depend on how we choose to use it. That does lie in our hands, but oftentimes it can feel a little bit overwhelming. But if we can't figure out a way to make this technology, somehow benefit all of humanity in a way that increases our access to education, and closes the economic divide, because we now have all the tools to do that. If we can't use this next step to do those things, then honestly, I'll say, like, we will have done it wrong. There's no reason why we shouldn't take this new entire opening of new technologies and new opportunities to change how we work, how we learn, how we interact with each other, to solve some of those problems, because we now have different tools. So I hope we look at them that way. But it is going to take architecting them, I think, with that empathy and that commitment to responsibility. And access is obviously the thing that has hurt us the most in education before. We really have had this inequity because of who has access to technology or not. We're not out of that yet. It takes a long time to be able to solve that. But as this technology more seamlessly integrates with us in our daily lives, I hope we can solve some of those challenges.
This sounds like something we could end this podcast. If you want to hear Monica Arés, you have the chance at AWE on October 24th. You will have a talk there titling Bridging Minds and Machines, AR and XR's Transformational Role in Education. Do we need to know something else, what you already said today, which will be part of that talk?
No, I would love to have people come together. Hopefully there'll be time for Q&A as well. So those that are in the field, those that are thinking about building for this particular industry can really come and we can have some great conversations. For me, I am most interested about how we are merging together the AI and the XR to solve some of those huge problems, right? The engagement, retention, personalized learning, and our skills-based assessment. New pathways are opening up for all of those. And how we can best use that, what industries make the best connection for it, and how we can really help our current learners become adaptable and prepared for the future of their work. So collectively, again, the future doesn't just happen, it's something we create. And so collectively, I hope that we can take the first few steps into making it extraordinary. Additionally, there's no playbook. None of us have a playbook for what's happening in the next few steps. And it takes bringing together the right minds and intellect to really want to solve these problems together. And I think we still have to bridge cross-functionally across, developers, the partners that want to help, the people that are doing the research. And so my job is to hopefully bring us all together around this topic.
Monica, can't wait to see you at AWE. Thank you very much for joining. And see you then.
Thank you so much. I'll see you soon.
And that's it for episode 51 of Spatial Realities. Thanks again to Monica for the interview. If you like this podcast, I would be happy if you could recommend it. Feel free to share the episode on social media, send it to colleagues and friends, and write a comment on Apple Podcast and Spotify. I'd also like to point you to our Discord server. You can find a link in the show notes or on spatialrealities.de. My name is Thomas Riedel, thank you for listening, and I can't wait to have you with us next time.
Dieser Podcast ist eine Droidboy-Produktion.